It's wonderful to greet you, Sister Rose Ann Schlitt. Many people know you as Sister Rose Elena, correct?
Oh, yes.
Yes, yes.
Of long ago.
Yes. Would you please confirm or deny the assumption or the illusion that I've had that you were born in the Dominican Republic?
Oh, well, that is not only an illusion, it's a falsehood.
So you're denying.
I'm denying.
Would you clear this fact up for me, please?
I was born in Florida, in Vero Beach, on the Atlantic coast, little town.
And I presume that you were educated by our sisters, the Adrian Dominicans?
Yes, providentially from first grade through 8th grade at St. Helens in Vero Beach, and then in high school in Fort Pierce, next door, 15 miles away, through high school.
I've never heard of St. Helens.
Well,
should I have?
It was one of the missions, the Florida missions of the Adrian Dominican Sisters, probably at the request of Bishop Barry and Mother Gerald.
When you say a mission, does that mean there wasn't a two-story school there?
No, I think it meant that Florida was considered mission territory within our country for a while. And the very first Mass in Vero Beach was said in my grandfather's house.
My heavens.
Yes.
And was he from Florida also?
No. My family, on both my father's and my mother's side, are from Missouri, a little farm village called Clover Bottom, Missouri, neighboring farms.
Oh my.
And both families moved to Florida, and they got together in Florida.
Was that for some particular reason, for work or
Yes, a lot of
livelihood?
A lot of the German immigrants, generations of them, settled in pockets in Missouri and Minnesota. And ours in Missouri had farms, and I don't know the financial reasons for which they moved, but first my father's family moved to Vero Beach, and then 6 years later, all of the Bounkers from neighboring farms. So that's how.
Did they get involved in the citrus industry at that point?
My mother's family was heavily involved in citrus. There was a piece of land in the name of all the siblings, and their whole life was involved in citrus.
Well, who were some of our missionary sisters that were there to teach you at St. Helens?
Well, Sister Immaculate Kelly was part of the initial community at St. Helens, to my understanding, along with Sister Timothy. But Sister Mary Immaculate taught me first and second grade. And then Sister Inez Pinger came along, I think it was third, fourth, and fifth. Sister Marie Arlene Berg. Regina Concepta Pinger was there. And those were my grade school teachers.
Did they have a convent or a house? Or?
It was different from the convents that we lived in, that the sisters lived in at the time. They had a rented house that the parish rented for the sisters, a wooden frame house.
And yours was what, a one room school? Or?
Well, it started out as a 2-room school and then became 3 rooms.
Oh my. So there were several grades taught in one room.
Yes, mostly 3 grades. And my 8th grade graduating class was a very small one, the smallest. I was the only girl in a class of 3, and so it was
wonderful. Well, when did you first get the itch about becoming an Adrian or searching out the Adrian Dominican Sisters for?
I think it just came along through powers of association and admiration. I kind of saw myself in those shoes, and that continued during high school, though I didn't want the sisters in my high school to know that I was thinking of that, nor did I want my classmates to know. But it became an automatic search for me through those years. And so I entered right after graduation from high school.
I was going to ask if your parents spoke Spanish at home, because you've spent.
Nobody spoke Spanish.
I think of you. You're so fluent in that language, so you must have learned it in high school.
We had no option for language other than Latin, and so I had no credentials for being sent overseas to Latin America.
So did you go right away to?
I went right away. It
After
was
profession.
not after profession, on profession day. My vows were barely out of my mouth and at the breakfast table, and I got an assignment to Puerto Rico, which I pronounced incorrectly and was corrected. And I left the next day for Puerto Rico. And Mother Gerald insisted I was to become a missionary. And that stayed with me my whole life.
Your whole life.
Yes.
Some 50 years, I presume, in the missionaries.
I was in overseas countries for 50 years, but in 7 different countries. So you may have thought about the Dominican Republic because I was there for 20 years, but at 3 different times.
All right, I know 2 of those countries so far, Puerto
Rico and the Dominican Republic. Then there was Peru for 9 years.
Oh, my.
And then there was Nicaragua for 10, with an interruption on the General Council. Back to Nicaragua, then to Mexico, then to Rome, and then to the Philippines. So, I mean, it was just a lifetime of global embrace and outreach.
You do not need a globe in your room. You know.
But I have a big atlas behind my thing to remind me every day. And I have a beautiful little globe symbol. Yes, right on my, to focus my prayer.
Now, Nicaragua, to be truthful, I never knew our sisters went to Nicaragua. When was that, Rose Ann?
It was precisely in 1979. There was a war being fought against the dictator, to oust the dictator. The Sandinista rebels gained control, and it was after a 30-year dictatorship, and the people were really suffering. And at the time of the beginning of the revolution, the Latin American Conference of Religious requested religious conferences of Latin America to support the religious who had been in Nicaragua during the war times, who were in need physically and psychologically, mentally probably, for some help. And so I was just returning to the Dominican Republic and offered to be a part of the emergency relief team, and the congregation said yes. It was to be for 3 months, which I did. But I wanted to present a proposal, which I did, to support for a longer time a local community there, a very poor community called Acahualinca. And after I was on the council, I returned and ended up also closing the mission. But several of us, through a period of 15 years, were there. So
who joined you initially?
Andrea Balcones was the first one, and then Marie Michael. And after that, we had sisters who were asked to be there who knew Spanish for a shorter period of time. And sisters like Jean Hughes and Margaret Lane, Mary Pat Dewey was down that way. And so it was a small mission with a beautiful focus. It's the most wonderful way to live in the midst of the people, working with them, trying to hear their hopes and forge projects that meant something to them. I look upon that period as a very graced time in my life. Challenging, but graced.
Yes, and forever in your heart.
Yes, lots of love.
Yes. The group of Latin American religious were very powerful, and I mean that in a good way. That very connected and very significant, and made a difference. Did they not?
They did for many years. I haven't kept up as I'd like to have done, but especially right after the adaptation to the Vatican Council, after the Bishops' Conference in Medellin, Colombia. It was the adaptation of the Vatican Council to the Latin American reality. And so many new, effervescent activities and projects and theologies were there. And so all of us in Peru were really riveted to the theologians connected with it's called the CLAR, and the taking theology, updating in theology, beginning base Christian communities, outreach to the periphery, living in the periphery.
You were the vision of Vatican II.
It was so exciting to have those opportunities as church. Exciting and challenging, and with all the ups and downs and later difficulties. But the CLAR has remained as a voice for the church. And
you were all of you were in the habit at that point too.
only the first year I went in the adapted habit. Even in the course of the first year, we were changing that. I went there in '69.
How did the people accept you? Us, once we changed into regular clothes.
Well, I don't know that they had that much of an experience of it. They had the initial 6 years of the first group of sisters, and I was of the second era. And I know we were different than many, but there were already sisters from different parts of the world, different parts of Europe. We had the Kentucky Ursulines that were there, our good friends. There were some IHMs who were in the habit, from IHMs from Philadelphia. So they saw the changes among us. I'm sure they wondered a lot more than what they said. They're a reserved people.
Yes.
Yeah.
When you were in Peru, was that the time that Sister Mary Kay Duillis was with you, Kenneth?
Well, she came down after I was there a while. She was at Berry University, and was investigating doing medical English courses at the medical hospital. And so she would come down for like 3 months, or 3 to 4 months, I believe, and then go back to Berry and teach at Berry medical English, and then she would come back. And it was after that that she established the community with Mariana Kerrigan and later Pam Mellenbach.
Rose Ann, was it a cultural challenge to leave the southern hemisphere there to come to Adrian to serve as a general council person?
Well,
it must have been. I hear so often the challenges that is for our sisters.
It is challenging. But for me personally, as a young sister, learning a bit about the Puerto Rican culture, about the Dominican culture and their problems, the Peruvian culture was so exciting and diversified, and so it was hard to leave those, but I loved them. And then I went to Nicaragua, and that was another one. But I'll have to admit, my culture shock was greater being on the General Council when the first thing for our first meeting was a 4-year calendar.
Excuse me.
I almost died. I mean, there were
Not
other
in your experience
things,
ever.
It was way out of my ballpark.
Yours was probably a 4-hour.
I don't know what the Holy Spirit meant, but I did.
Oh, that's rich. What was it? Sister Carol Ioannis, the prior?
Yeah, that's
prioress,
right.
And who else was on the council with you?
It was Helen Sohn, Catherine de Klerk, Mary Mullins, and I.
Oh, Mary
82
rest
to
in peace.
86. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So Rome, let us get on the boat. I shouldn't say boat. Let us get on the ship or fly to Rome.
All means of transportation
All means.
in Rome. Yes, Sister Margaret Ormond invited me to take on the responsibility for a joint Dominican project called Dominican Volunteers International.
Now, some of our viewers may not know who Sister Margaret Ormond is.
She had been the former, and then later prioress of the Columbus Dominicans and then the Dominicans of Peace. But in that interval, she was head of Dominican Sisters International for, I don't know, something like 9 years. I don't know exactly.
And that had just been established. She was the first.
She was the first. And so it was a collaborative effort at Santa Sabina with the friars and with the sisters. And so this was a marvelous opportunity to get to know the order and the order around the world, some international meetings that we attended as promoters of the order, and just to hear the stories of everybody.
How did you recruit volunteers?
Well, we had to use the means at our disposal. We didn't have money to just travel to get to know you around the world, or even to attend to all of the volunteers. It was a sporadic planning, but we used the internet mainly for communication and other means that were at our disposal. Sometimes at regional gatherings of Dominicans, let's say Sisters and Brothers for Justice and Peace, we'd go to those regional gatherings, or in Latin America. And we had a structure that required that there be Dominican communities, support communities, sending communities from the countries that would know a volunteer or a potential volunteer and recommend them based on their commitment, based on their character. And then we had requests from Dominican communities inserted among the poor mainly around the world that requested volunteers for a specific purpose out of their need for personnel or a certain maybe technology or skill. And so I would coordinate between the communities in one part of the world and the other part of the world and the volunteer, and we said yes to many and we said no, or I said no, because it depended on the motivation of the volunteer and what their sincere interests
So you
were.
vetted them.
I vetted them, and I didn't even know the word then.
Yes.
And that was marvelous, but I loved to prepare them for mission. And to, once they got on their new mission, to help them understand it and communicate and reflect on constant reflection and even writing of what they experienced. And that was wonderful.
Could you give us an example of someone, let's say, that was sent by one of our congregations here in the United States or the Philippines that you were able to place with a Dominican congregation, a poor Dominican congregation?
Well, actually, there are many examples, but the only volunteer that I placed from the U.S. was one from Oregon, who was recommended by a group of Dominican sisters of a theology faculty, and she had a real desire to work in development work and develop her master's around that. We sent her to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. That was a real big difference.
Wow.
And similarly,
Was she successful?
she was. I haven't heard too much from her after, but you don't expect that, and it's nice when it
How
happens.
long did the volunteer months go on? How many months were they there?
Well, they had to commit for a year.
For 1 year.
For 1 year. Many were young adults after college, and they could renew it for another year, but we didn't accept longer than that. It was not meant to be a permanent, it's meant to be a shared Dominican
So
experience.
they lived right with the sisters and
Most did.
Most did.
Most did, and most wanted to and needed to. Or brothers. We had communities of brothers too.
Oh, really?
Oh, we sent men, yes.
Oh, how wonderful.
That's why it was
Does
a
any
joint
other
project.
connections stick out in your mind?
Well, it's actually four university students from England we sent to the Philippines, a poor fishing community. They all entered the order.
Oh, my.
But they were testing the waters before, but made the decision they wanted a global experience. And so one left, but three are Dominican priests in England now.
In England. I thought maybe they would have stayed in the Philippines.
No, that, well, see, they're part of a provincial structure, but
Yes.
they have ties.
My. Well, you must be very proud.
I am.
Yes.
I
And
really am.
while you were in Rome, didn't you live with one of our
Oh,
Rocky
yes.
Dominican sisters?
Yes, we lived in a multi-Dominican, an inter-Dominican congregational community. I lived with Nazik Mati at Villa Rosa,
How do you spell her name?
Nazik.
IK. And she's currently on the council.
She's on the General Council
Council.
of the St. Catherine Dominican.
Was she studying in Rome at
She
the
was
time?
studying, yes, she was doing exegesis.
Oh, God bless her.
Yes.
And ended up
Ended up studying, getting a doctorate in Oxford. Yeah.
Did you meet the sisters in Rome, Sister
Oh,
Hickman?
yes,
and
often. We met them
yes.
often.
How dear they are, yes.
Yes.
So did you hop from Rome to the Philippines to serve our sisters there?
No, actually, I hopped back to the U.S. with the idea that it must be time for me to learn how to live in my own country. But before I went to Rome, I was also in Mexico a little bit. But at any rate, I made that decision knowing that I would need a transition to do that. But I transitioned for a few months, and then the idea between Attracta and I was that I go prior to the actual merger that had been requested through the previous general chapter. And so I accompanied the sisters, got to know them, and I loved them. And the merger happened while I was there. And so I represented us while it was being celebrated here.
It was so wonderful to welcome so many of them for our general chapter too.
Yes,
That had never met us, and we them. Yes. Do you still keep in contact?
Oh,
with
yes, all the time.
Yes. You may have had several different computers through your life, given the ministry you have on the computer.
Well, it's not that I had them. I had to learn them where I was, because
But globally, that's really how you keep in touch with
in
people.
Rome, that was the way we had to choose over surface mail or air mail. The program never would have worked without a quicker means.
Yeah.
Sending I sent articles, formation articles, to them over the internet, and then they had to discuss them with their sending community or the receiving community, and that was the best we could do then.
That must have been a very exciting
Oh,
time. Did
that
you
part was
ever
good.
attend some of the major gatherings of the Dominican Fathers?
I was invited, along with Sister Fabiola Velazquez, to be representatives of the sisters at the general chapter in 2010, shortly before I left there. And that was a brand new experience, but that's where I had a lot of insights into the life of our Dominican brothers, and established good relationships. Of course, we have a little bit of a different experience in our general chapter, but we're not as old as they are, and a lot of good friends,
And that chapter elected
Father Bruno. Calore.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And their term goes, ours is 6 years, theirs is 12.
No, it's 9.
9.
Mm-hmm.
My. Now, when I was here on campus and Sister Donna Markham was prioress, Sister Phyllis Socorro, who was in with the Contemplative Sisters in Farmington, Michigan, called Weber and asked if there was room for sisters, because they had invited the Master General at that time, and I forget his name. Rosie.
Carlos Aspiros.
All right, Carlos.
Carlos.
Yes,
Father
yes.
Carlos.
And asking him to come to Farmington to give a retreat. And he said, I'll come to the United States if all of the Contemplative Sisters can be together. And so eventually Sister Donna Markham invited them to be our guests. That was a historic moment here on campus.
I understand that it was.
You were in Rome at the time.
I was in Rome at the time. In fact, I translated Carlos's notes into English so that he could give some of the outlines, at least, or the major points of his conferences.
Oh my.
So that when he returned, he came to my office and he sat down, which he seldom, if ever, did. And he sat and talked for a long time about his experience here in Adrian. He was so grateful for the hospitality, the sisters were happy, etc., meeting us. But I was surprised to learn, I heard that whole story when he came to my office. But then at the general chapter, he said, he expressed what he called postcards of my heart memories. And he mentioned two of the sisters, and one of the two was of visiting the DLC with our sisters and seeing what we did to care for our sisters, the programs and the opportunities they had, the gracious ways in which they spoke, and everything that was happening there. He said he was amazed. He had never seen anything like that. So it's good for us to know.
I heard at some point he was really moved by the joy of the sisters also.
Yes, that's true.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that was made you proud, didn't it?
It did.
Yes.
I was surprised.
Yes, yes.
But it's good for us to hear.
Mm-hmm. Rose Ann, as you have time now to reflect on your beautiful life, your global life, if I may say, and the people who have touched your life and yours, theirs, what remains still in your heart that brings it a fire, as we say?
The fire comes from the wonderful experiences of having had the opportunity to be with and learn about so many people of different cultures, but living with them, close to them, working close with them. Those are that's the warmth that I receive every day in my prayer. And people in difficult circumstances, but working together and sharing. I wouldn't trade those years, 50 years,
50
I wouldn't
years.
have traded for anything in the world.
It feels as if you're one with them. Would that be correct?
I am.
Yes. So I'm very grateful for Mother Gerald, who sent you to Puerto Rico, and said you can learn Spanish.
You just do it.
You just do it. And I've learned along the way that you have a godchild in Peru, correct? What is her name?
Ileana. She's now in her 40s with her own family, and we're in contact quite frequently.
Is there anyone in the countries you've been that you'd like to send a message or a general message to those that have touched your life?
Well, actually, I could mention many, but the volunteer that I really care for and admire so much is a Filipino woman from the Mindanao, the rebel area of the Philippines. We sent her to Indonesia, and which was a totally Muslim culture, the opposite of her culture. And she has continued to find ways to be missionary in her country and in the Asian countries beyond. She's amazing.
What is her name?
Gemily. Gemily Mesa. Yeah.
Well, we wish her well and send prayers her way. And to all those who are touched by your hand and your work and your heart, especially those you brought to the poor and the poor that worked with you. God bless you, Rose.